I sure hope that you take full advantage of their knowledge. You never know when they might be changing career paths. So I'd like to introduce on first here Dr. Rigas Karamanos with Viterra, and we've got Dr. Ross McKenzie with Alberta Agriculture, and Ray Dowbenko with Agrium. So this afternoon's session is really devoted towards both fertility. There's been an resurgence, I guess, of dribble banding, so we're going to look at the principles behind that and the different nozzles that we have. But first we're going to talk about what I'm not sure that I've called it, but I've called them crop growth enhancers. There's a lot of different products out there these days, and I'd like for these guys to sort of talk about them. How do we evaluate them in field situations? This is something that we're typically not going to have formalized research products or projects on them. Perhaps with the changes in CFIA, Rigas is going to talk a little bit about that. There's still a lot of unknowns on how that's going to go. That's the agency that sort of regulates fertilizer type products. And once we're done with that, we'll head out and talk about dribble banding.
All right, thank you.
This is Alberta
I can,
Agriculture
sure.
one here. They
Thank
got
you.
this when Rigas started. This one. I think Rigas
And that's why they gave it to me.
tick, 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 tick,
Yeah.
tick, tick, tick.
Reminds me when I used to teach at U of S, that was back in the 80s.
You want it on the ground?
And no, that's okay. And I was playing soccer and I was the keeper and they got kicked in my jaw. So my teeth were wired up. So when I used to go lecture, I used to carry one of these because I was talking like this and I had to be, people couldn't hear me. Anyway, thank you for having me here. I'm not sure whether being recorded and showing all these wonderful products can be very dangerous to the remaining of my career. Or
Wonderful.
wonderful. Now, was canola $6 a bushel, we wouldn't be here talking about all these things, but because it's 14 and 15, you people can afford to buy all kinds of wonderful products. So, now one thing you may have heard is that the agency that regulates the Canadian Fertilizers Act, CFIA, or the Canadian Food Inspection Agency, based on the last budget that came down, will no longer be testing and registering products for safety, for efficacy. So in other words, they're only going to test products and register them for safety. So as long as a product does not have anything, heavy metals or anything that is dangerous to your health, will be available for you to buy. And based on that, you're going to have a whole bunch of products that will be coming out in the market, and there is a bunch of them already present. Some of them are legitimate products. Most of them come from the horticultural industry, but you got to remember that the horticultural industry is primarily a greenhouse industry. They grow plants, high-valued plants in soilless media, and anything you throw in those media will cause a response. So this is not the case with our commodity crops, large-scale crops. So it is advisable for anybody that is, looking for an edge. And I have farmer friends that ask me about products like this one here. And I do a little bit of research on it and I say, I don't think it's worthwhile. No, I'm going to put it on 500 acres because I'm looking for an advantage. And I say, for goodness sakes, not 500 acres, put it maybe on 20 and see if it does anything. Number one is try it in small scale. Number two, please replicate. Make sure that you have at least 2 strips of what you're trying on your field. I'll tell you something, it's really hilarious. As you're driving down, as you're riding the platform down, when you get to about the end of this plot here, just look far back. have a look and you will find out that this spot where all these wonderful products have been applied is the worst spot on this plot here. Now I can walk very easily and say, see, you put all these products and all they do is they damage the crop. But this is not true. Actually, this is probably variability in this part of the field. So in essence, what we should have done, we should have replicated that maybe once more down in the other part of the plot where things look a little bit better. Okay, so all these are foliar products, and some of them, for example, this is TM Agriculture. I went onto their website and everything is coming. So I cannot discern what it is, what it does. However, you know, it is some people that are applying it find benefits. So from now on, you are going to be the researchers. It's not going to be Ross or myself that is going to be doing research on your behalf. You will be the researchers. You will have to decide with your own research whether you are going to be benefiting out of these products. And as I mentioned, the prudent thing to do is not to put the whole farm onto them. And you have to be very, very careful of products that are part of programs, because that's a very easy way out of you getting nothing out. Oh, you didn't follow the program, you know. And we have a few of them that we deal with, you know, oh, you didn't follow the program. You have to follow the program. Oh, you were a day late in applying, spraying, or goofy things like that. So, you know, you be the judge. So you can go through, actually, it will take you a total of 1 minute to go through and realize that there is any one of them that shows any better than the other. Any differences that you see here are merely differences in the variability of the crop, unless if my two eminent colleagues here can see something that I don't see. Ross, Ray, do you see something I don't see here?
No, I'm fine.
Yeah. So.
You want to talk about the products?
Yep. Now you are more familiar with some of the products.
Yeah, some of them, yeah.
And I will turn it over to Ray. Like I said, I looked at some of them. Like you're going to find out, these are crop enhancers. And to be honest with you, looking into their websites, the research is under construction, whatever it is under construction. So I don't know what it is in them and what causes the enhancement. As a matter of fact, earlier on when I came this morning, I was trying to persuade the people to stick a couple of these stakes down there and pretend that we put something there, because they look, you know, that part of the field looks much better than this part of the field. And that reminds me, back in 2000, I said 22 experiments, and you may have heard me giving a talk, 22 experiments with a $5.50 per acre treatment. And what we did in that $5.50 per acre treatment, we threw money onto the field. And in 2 of the 22 experiments, one was in Harrington, Alberta, and one was in Elm Creek, Manitoba, we got 18 and 45% yield increase by throwing money on it. It's just that's nature, that's variability, like comparing this small part here to the part next to it. Like I said, you can very easily make a conclusion that all these things cause damage, but it has nothing to do with the products. The other products I know that Ray is familiar with, so I will turn it over to Ray. And they're all legit products.
The valuable learning is to tell you about what the products are supposed to have done and what to look for, and we'll get more of that later on. But Rigas was mentioning some of the products down here. The one down here called NPACT, it's a triazone form of nitrogen. It's a slowly available form of urea nitrogen. So it's not a controlled release, but it's a slowly available form based on how the products are manufactured. Its nature of use is for foliar application, and the research behind the product was to have shown that it actually has more residence time on the leaf, so you get more leaf absorption. So if this is something you're doing top dressing, you're looking for better residence time on a leaf, this is a product that you'd look at. But when we get down to the other part of the field, you'll see that you can use other products to do something similar. So all the products have claims, have labels. As Rigas says, some of them are works in process, other ones have some science behind them, and really the onus is on you to do some evaluation for these different products and do some research when you start. So that's the end pack down at the end, a foliar applied nitrogen product to have greater residence time on a leaf and better leaf absorption. We have some other products here. I see Ken's got a sample on the table. Black label for canola, black label for wheat, phosphate fertilizer with a blend of micronutrients, perhaps boron, copper, or zinc. The research behind that product was it's blended or made with 2 fractions of organic matter, humic and fulvic acids, and the idea is it's supposed to increase the availability of the phosphorus in the soil, help stop it from becoming less soluble products with calcium and magnesium in high pH soils, or iron and aluminum in lower pH soils. So again, as Rigas pointed out, you don't see much of a difference. People are using these products, but you have to look at the manufacturer's labels and the recommendations. Now, Ross?
Well, actually, Rigas and Ray have pretty much summed up sort of the comments that I actually have. And occasionally, Rigas and Ray and I sometimes maybe tend to agree to disagree on occasional points, but on some of this stuff, I think we kind of see very, very similarly. I was just going to make a couple of comments. First of all, I always like to suggest to farmers when you're presented with various types of products to use on your farm, I kind of like to split things into about 4 categories. Category 1 would be a product that's very likely to work on your farm. Category 2 would be possibly, maybe a moderate category that it'll work on your farm. Number 3 would be probably not very likely, but in certain circumstances it might work on your farm. Category 4 would be probably not a chance in hell category. And that's what you really have to do. For every product that is promoted to you, you have to really try and put it into perspective. What has a reasonable chance of working on your farm based on the claims that it makes, and what would maybe have an unlikely chance of maybe really making a difference. And so with these products, I've had too many lawsuits filed against me, so I'm not going to make any negative claims. I'm just going to say, look at the claims, and do they sound realistic? Do they sound like they're plausible? Is there a reasonably good chance they're going to make a difference? So now, I thought I'd maybe just even bring along an example. I actually had it sent to me about a week ago. A fellow had his alfalfa field sampled, and it was actually tissue sampled and soil sampled. And at the end of the day, he actually has a recommendation for black label zinc, Re-Enforce K, and an M-Pack, and 2 of those 3 products are here, except for the black label zinc. In this particular case, would be exactly the same product was used here. It would be 0.75% boron and 0.3% zinc. But when I looked at the tissue samples, nitrogen was great, phosphorus was marginal, potassium was great. Yet, based on the tissue samples, even though in my opinion, the tissue sample showed things were very good, he still had a recommendation for black label zinc at 2 liters per acre. At $4 a liter, that's $8 for the black label zinc. For the Re-Enforce K, 2 liters per acre, costs $4 a liter. So $8 for the black label zinc, $8 for the Re-Enforce K, and then the M-Pack, it was a little cheaper. It's kind of a special deal, I guess. $3.40 a liter, but needed two as well. Total cost $22.80 to put those 3 different products on your alfalfa. Is there a chance it's going to work? Well, you're putting on a bunch of nitrogen on a crop that's fixing its own nitrogen, so that doesn't seem to make sense. Lots of potassium in the plant tissue, so really no need to put on potassium. So maybe a little bit low in zinc, but it would be just barely into the marginal category. So, and we found over the years that maybe we need to be doing more fine-tuning with our levels in tissue as opposed to are we really deficient? So that would be the other side to look at. So oftentimes you may get these recommendations. Would it really be worth it to put $22.40 or $22.80 worth of these various products on your crop with probably minimal chance of response? So, but that's a question you have to ask yourself. Is this really reasonable? Ray has a comment.
One comment, Ross. So for the group here, for the group here, you're talking about specific products. What if that recommendation had come for spreading nitrogen on a crop using urea that doesn't need nitrogen? What if they'd recommended potash as 0060 and they recommended regular monoammonium phosphate? The answer would still be the same, that you're wasting your money because you don't need it. Right. And so when Rigas commented earlier, and Ross too, about programs, you have to decide. Sometimes you have a new product that you want to try, yet there are other options out there that deliver the same type of material at perhaps a lower cost. It's just, damn it, not as sexy. And I think you guys got to get over that shit, right?
Ray always gets right down to the brass tacks and tells it like it is, and so does Rigas. But I think we're sort of all agreed that lots of claims being made, but you really have to be the one to do the critical thinking to decide would any of these products potentially help you. And if you're wondering about it, well, feel free to talk to your agronomist, or maybe a couple of different agronomists, and Ray and Rigas and I, we're always more than happy to maybe provide our honest professional opinions as well. So in the future, if you're faced with something you're kind of wondering, well, maybe not, you're not sure, seek out 2 or 3 honest opinions, not from the person selling it, from independent people who are well qualified to maybe comment. So that'll be my comments, and any last minute comments from Ray or Rigas. Any questions?
I had a question on the tissues related to what you said as an example. Where is it that they get the database for the levels that are supposed to be in the plant for tissues, and how does that relate to optimum yield? Is that like really old data? Did they make it up, or is it independent?
A lot of the stuff comes pre-1980, but Rigas was said in my ear that he'd like to comment first. I'll let him comment, then I'll make a comment.
First of all, tissue testing on an absolute basis is useless unless you're looking at potatoes and PDL analysis. And even that is questionable. I'll give you an example. I used to run the Saskatchewan Soil Testing Lab from 1989 to 97. In 91, I used I put for the first time tissue testing. And I looked into the literature, and some of the data was local, some from US, but I had to respond because people wanted tissue testing. Well, guess what? It's 2012, and the database that I put in 1991 is still there, okay? Now, number one. Number two, I'll give you an example. Back in my Westco days, we funded a project with agriculture in Canada in northern Manitoba with zinc. They had 12 different cultivars of beans. And there were 7 different criteria. There were some cultivars that had the same criteria, but out of the 12, there were 7 different criteria for zinc deficiency developed from there. Tissue testing is so much cultivar dependent that there is no way on this good earth, green earth, that you're gonna have an accurate soil tissue test. So whether they pick it out of a hat or whether there's some data from 20, 30 years ago, that's how it is. And I would put absolutely no weight on the absolute values unless if you had sampled the good part and the bad part, and now you're comparing. And you better take some soil sample with it too when you're doing the comparison. So, and that's why, like I've published a tremendous amount of work on micronutrients. Probably 80% of the literature in Western Canada on micronutrients has my name on it. Take boron, for example. It's one of the nutrients that has been abused, micronutrients that are abused the most. You look at the criteria for boron, and none of the fields that we grow, canola, whatever, meet any of these criteria for deficiency in Western Canada. And you have now people that they are pushing that criteria higher and higher and higher so they can recommend, boron. Why? Because they want to differentiate themselves from everybody else. So
the argument that I hear, Rigas, often though, is, with cultivar development and improved cropping practices that are pushing yields way beyond what.
And I agree. Well, okay. The research that I did that was published 5-6 years ago. We had a range, average yields from 18 to 65 bushels of canola. Now somebody can argue we're getting, 90 and 100 bushels, and I can see. But in that range between 18 and 65, I'm sorry to tell you, nothing has changed. As far as boron is concerned. And we have the same thing. I set up, I ran soil testing lab and tissue testing lab for 8 years, and now I look. There are a number of companies out there. They run the analysis, and then they sit down with a farmer with a pen and a paper and give recommendations. And they say, my recommendations is to put that. Where the heck did you get your recommendations from? Where is the research it's coming from? And ladies and gentlemen, things are going to get worse because that research doesn't exist anymore. The government has reduced research, university has reduced research, and private industry, there is no more research happening there either. So you're going to be relying on all these people that come with their recommendations. I don't know where they're getting them from. Certainly not from research in Western Canada. Huge responses of boron, of canola to boron in Quebec, but we're not in Quebec. So, anyway.
So you're saying you never seen any yield increases with the use of boron?
No. Just as simple as that.
Okay, now he's not saying they don't occur.
I didn't say they don't occur.
He hasn't seen them,
Yeah.
right? Okay, so listen to what you're hearing from everybody.
I've seen boron deficiencies up in the northeast, up in the sandy, transitional soils, especially up in northeast Saskatchewan. And I have pictures of boron deficient canola.
So you haven't seen any down here?
No. Now, as you're getting more, you look at some of the soil tests in this area, and actually I was talking with one of the gentlemen on the phone a couple of weeks ago. What is happening now with all the rain we're getting, and the irrigation water becomes not as highly used because we are getting a lot of rain. There are some sandy soils in this area that have very low boron, or sulfur. We didn't used to see sulfur deficiencies, now we are. And eventually maybe we will see boron. But if you're irrigating in this area, there's a lot of boron in your water,
Hey, Ross, take it from. Oh, he's doing well.
Well, I killed the conversation there.
No, we still got a few more comments.
A couple comments.
I will just make one comment on boron, is that we did quite a bit of work in the 1980s with boron, and pretty much came to the conclusion we're not terribly happy with the soil test that is used. It's just a hot water soluble method for boron, and some people suggest we use 1 part per million as a critical level. Others suggest we use 0.5 parts per million for boron. In the work that we did, even when we had soils at 0.2 parts per million for boron, we could not get response to boron with a range of crops until we went up to about 3 pounds of boron. Then we get a little bit of a toxicity problem, and we actually reduced yields in a range of 10 to 20% with peas, canola, and beans. So with a 3 pound per acre application of boron. So it doesn't take very much to cause a problem, but how widespread of deficiencies do we have? A lot of people depend on soil tests, and we have to recognize that soil tests aren't the be-all and end-all either. And particularly with some of the micronutrients, I would not be recommending boron based on a soil test that says you're low. That soil test, I just don't have much faith in it at all.
So do you go to a second opinion then? If you're not going to depend on the soil test, what do you go to?
Basically, my opinion would be in southern Alberta, if you had a low soil test, less than 0.2 parts per million of boron, and you're going to be growing potatoes or sugar beets, you might want to consider trying some boron. Any other crop, regardless how low your soil test is, I probably wouldn't bother with it, because the soil test, I just don't have any faith in it. And we have done work at 0.2 parts per million with a number of crops across southern Alberta, could get no response.
Yeah, I was down to 0.15. The generally accepted criterion for boron deficiency in the research literature is 0.5 0.35 parts per million. And if you go into the literature, and I'll tell you, I've got books and papers on boron. That criterion is true for PEI. It is true for Washington, for California, Taiwan. And you look the soils, and the reason why it's true is because their soil organic matter is less than 0.8%. So, conceivably, as you're leveling fields in this area, you may end up into situations where you have sand lenses with very low soil organic matter. And I'm not going to say you're not going to see it. All I'm saying on a large scale basis, you just simply don't see it. There is an excellent master's thesis from the University of Saskatchewan where they showed that the boron forget about the soil test. It's the same thing in research. I tried to calibrate that hot water soluble, doesn't do a darn thing. And there is good research. There is a master's thesis out of the University of Saskatchewan that shows very clearly that soils in our area in Western Canada, they generate a lot of boron through mineralization from the soil organic matter. If you have more than 1.2% organic matter, there is going to be enough boron mineralized throughout the growing season. So now people say it's dry and it's not mineralized, and while it's dry, you got other issues to concern about yourself, not the boron that is not going to mineralize.
Okay, Ken, then we're going to go. I just want to say one thing. Despite what you're hearing from us, we have professional and personal opinions. We're paid to be right. But don't take anything that we're saying as gospel, thanks, Ross, or as the idea that products like these don't work. That's what we're hearing today, is that there's a place for things. You have to decide what that place is. Don't just be sheep following somebody's recommendation. Build your own database and find other opinions as well. So please don't interpret what we're saying as these products don't work, because I'm sure there's situations where they work. Fair enough, okay? That's all I wanted to say. Back to the boron thing, because I've done the same thing, and we have a hell of a time trying to get a response to boron the same way. Doesn't mean it doesn't exist. And you shouldn't listen to three of us because we're not on your farm, right? Maybe you've used it on your farm and it's perfect, so you just think we're full of shit, and we go down there.